My husband cheated with his coworker for 6 months, but at the boss's New Year's party, in front of 80 guests, we exposed them at midnight, and they never expected what happened next. I'm 36 years old. I work in the accounting department of a mid-sized company, and I still can't believe my 10-year marriage ended the way it did. I mean, I knew things weren't good. I'd known that for years. But I never imagined everything would explode so spectacularly at a New Year's Eve party, in front of literally all my husband's bosses and coworkers. I guess I should start at the beginning, when Ryan and I were still happy, or at least I thought we were. We met when I was like 24, he was 25, and everything was pretty normal at first. We got married after 2 years of dating, bought a small house in the suburbs, adopted a cat, the typical young couple life trying to build something together. The first few years were good. Honestly, we had our fights like any marriage, but nothing serious. The problem started when we decided to have children, or well, when we tried to have them and couldn't. We spent like 3 years doing fertility treatments, spending thousands of dollars we really didn't have, enduring the injections and medical appointments and hopes that crumbled month after month. After the third failed IVF attempt, we were both emotionally destroyed and basically bankrupt, and that's when everything changed between us. I don't know exactly when we stopped being a couple and became roommates who shared a bed, but it happened gradually. Ryan started working later and later. I focused more on my work too, and when we were home, we barely talked. We'd order takeout and eat watching Netflix without saying a word. We'd go to sleep on opposite sides of the bed, and on weekends each of us did our own thing. Looking back, I should have seen the signs of what was coming, but I guess I was so trapped in my own misery that I didn't realize he was also looking for a way out, just in a very different way than I would have imagined. Things started getting weird like 6 months before everything exploded. Ryan got a promotion at work, which it's been a good thing, but it came with much more responsibility, and a new team of people he had to work closely with. Among them was Madison, a 9-year-old girl who apparently was very good at her job and who Ryan mentioned constantly. At first I didn't pay attention. It's okay for him to talk about his coworkers, right? But then he started coming home even later, always with excuses that they had to finish projects or that the team went out for drinks after work. And when he was home, he lived glued to his phone, smiling while typing messages, and if I asked him what was so funny, he'd just say work stuff. One day, like 2 months before New Year's, we were sitting on the couch and his phone vibrated on the coffee table. I picked it up without thinking to hand it to him and saw a message from Madison that said something like, "Can't wait to see you tomorrow. I miss your face," with a heart emoji. I asked him directly what that meant and he got super defensive, snatched the phone from my hands and said it was an inside joke with the team, that Madison was like that with everyone, very affectionate and friendly. I told him it seemed weird that a coworker would send him those kinds of messages, but he insisted I was overreacting and misinterpreting things. And that was that. Because honestly, I didn't feel like fighting either. We were already disconnected enough without adding more drama to the situation. The following weeks were more of the same. Ryan increasingly distant, increasingly more time at work, increasingly secretive with his phone. I felt like an idiot because part of me knew something was happening, but I had no concrete proof, and another part simply didn't want to admit that my marriage was so bad that my husband could be cheating on me. Then came the invitation to the New Year's Eve party at Gregory's house, Ryan's boss. It was one of those fancy parties where basically the whole company was going to be there, and Ryan told me it was important that I go with him because it would look bad if he showed up alone. I almost laughed when he said that, as if he cared what I thought or felt after months of treating me like I was a piece of furniture. But I went to the party. I bought myself a new dress, which he paid for. Obviously, because Ryan has always been terrible with money. I did my hair, put on makeup, the whole thing. Gregory's house was literally a mansion, like one of those you see in magazines, with a huge garden and lights everywhere. There were like 80 people there, between company employees and their partners, waiters serving champagne, a full bar, live music. I mean, everything super fancy. Ryan introduced me to some people I didn't know, including Christopher, Madison's husband. Christopher was a nice guy, like 35 years old, an architect, and we had an interesting conversation because it turns out we went to the same high school, although in different years. I immediately liked him. He seemed genuine and kind, very different from how Ryan had become lately. The party went on and everything seemed normal, or as normal as a corporate party where everyone is trying to impress the boss can be. Ryan disappeared at some point, said he was going to the bathroom, but like 20 minutes passed and he didn't come back. I was talking with Christopher and other people when he asked me if I had seen Madison, that he couldn't find her either. I got a knot in my stomach because I immediately knew. I just knew what was happening. I told Christopher that maybe we should look for them, you know, casually without making a scene, and he agreed. We walked through the house, checked the different rooms, the terrace, and nothing. Then Christopher suggested that maybe they were in the backyard, which was huge and had like different sections with benches and fountains and the whole thing. We went out through a side door and walked toward the back of the property, where there were fewer people and it was darker. And there, we saw them. Ryan and Madison were standing near a fountain, very close to each other, and as we got closer, we saw Madison lean in and kiss Ryan on the cheek. But it wasn't a casual friend kiss. It was one of those kisses that lasts too long and where there's clearly something more. Christopher froze beside me. I felt like someone had hit me in the stomach with a baseball bat. I couldn't breathe well. My hands started shaking, and all I thought was, is this really happening? Is my husband really cheating on me right in front of my eyes at his boss's party? I was about to run toward them to make a scene right there, but Christopher grabbed my arm and told me, "Wait, I have a better idea." He looked at me with an expression that was half pain and half determination and asked me if I wanted revenge. I said yes, without hesitating for a second. This is where things get interesting. It turns out Gregory's house had a main room with huge windows overlooking the backyard, and right outside those windows, in the most visible spot from inside, there was an area with a kind of lit gazebo. Christopher quickly explained his plan to me. We were going to get Ryan and Madison to move to that area. We were going to make sure all the guests were looking toward the windows right at midnight, and then we'd open the curtains so everyone could see what was happening. It was risky, it was dramatic, and it was perfect. We split up. Christopher went to talk to Ryan and Madison, told them something about there being a better spot in the garden to see the fireworks that supposedly were going to be launched at midnight, a lie. But they didn't know that. I went inside the house and started telling people that Gregory had organized a special surprise for midnight, and that everyone should be in the main room, looking toward the garden windows. People started gathering there, including Gregory himself and the human resources person from the company, who, by the way, was named William and was super strict about workplace fraternization policies. There were like 5 minutes left until midnight. Christopher came in and looked for me. I signaled to him that everything was ready. He walked over to the curtains covering the large windows in the room. I stood at the front of the crowd with a glass of champagne in my hand, trying to look calm, even though inside I was about to throw up from nerves. People started the countdown. 10, 9, 8. And I looked at Christopher, who had his hands on the curtain cords. 7, 6, 5, and I nodded at him. 4, 3, 2, 1, and Christopher pulled the curtains, opening them completely just as everyone shouted, "Happy New Year!" And there they were, Ryan and Madison, perfectly illuminated by the garden lights, kissing. It wasn't a kiss on the cheek this time. It was a full kiss, one of those movie kisses, with their arms around each other and everything. The silence that followed was probably the most awkward thing I've experienced in my life. People literally stood there with their mouths open. Some turned to look at me, others turned to look at Christopher, others turned to look at Gregory and William. Nobody knew what to do or what to say. It was glorious and horrible at the same time. Ryan and Madison realized what had happened when they heard the murmur of people and turned toward the windows. I saw Ryan's face when he realized that literally all his coworkers, his boss, and I were watching him kiss his married coworker. He turned white as a sheet. Madison started crying immediately. They both ran out of the garden, and I heard the sound of a car starting minutes later. Christopher and I stood there, shaking, in shock at what we had just done, but also feeling strangely satisfied. The party basically ended after that. People started leaving quickly, everyone murmuring among themselves, throwing me looks of pity and looks of morbid curiosity. Gregory came up to me and said he was so sorry, that he had no idea what was going on between Ryan and Madison, and that this was definitely going to have consequences at work. William, the HR guy, looked furious and told me this directly violated the company's policy on relationships between employees, especially since they were both married to other people. I left that party feeling weird. Like, I had managed to expose Ryan, but I also felt empty and sad because it meant my marriage was definitely over. I got home around 1 in the morning. Ryan wasn't there, obviously. His phone was off. I took off my dress, took off my makeup, and sat on the bed wondering what was going to happen now. I didn't cry that night. I think I was still in shock. I fell asleep around 4 in the morning and woke up to the sound of my phone ringing at 10. It was Ryan. I answered, and before I could say anything, he started yelling at me. How dare I humiliate him like that? I ruined his career. I made him look like an idiot in front of everyone. I was a vengeful bitch. I let him talk for like 5 minutes while he spewed all his venom, and when he finished, the only thing I said was, "You ruined our marriage. I just made sure everyone knew what kind of person you are," and I hung up. During the following weeks, things got intense. Ryan tried to come back home 2 days after the party, but I had changed the locks. I left his things in the garage. He called me again crying, saying he was sorry, that he had made a mistake, that Madison meant nothing. I told him it was too late, that I had already hired a divorce lawyer and that the papers would reach him soon. He got furious again and threatened to fight for the house and all our money, which was basically nothing because he had spent everything on his outings with Madison, but whatever. I told him to do whatever he wanted and hung up again. Meanwhile, Christopher was also in the process of divorcing Madison. We stayed in touch because, I don't know. I think we understood each other in a way that nobody else could understand. We had both been betrayed by our partners in the most humiliating way possible, and we had both taken revenge together. He became a good friend during that horrible time, someone I could talk to without having to explain why I felt a certain way. The news from work came like 2 weeks after the party. Both Ryan and Madison were fired. The company's policy was super clear about relationships between married employees, and the fact that they had been exposed so publicly at the boss's party made it impossible for Gregory to keep them. Ryan called me hysterical when he got the news, blaming me for ruining his life, saying that now he had no job or money. I told him maybe he should have thought about that before cheating on his wife with his coworker. I hung up and blocked his number. The divorce papers reached him like a month after the party. His lawyer contacted mine, trying to negotiate, but I didn't want anything from him. I let him keep his car, which he was still paying for. I kept the house, which was in my name, because Ryan had terrible credit, and we split the debts we had together. It was relatively simple because we had no children, and because the evidence of his infidelity was so obvious that he had no way to fight for more things. What I didn't know was that Ryan was living with Madison at her parents' house. Christopher told me because he still had contact with some of Madison's relatives who passed him information. Apparently, Madison was convinced that Ryan loved her and that they were going to be together now that they were both getting divorced, and Ryan was taking advantage of that to have a place to stay. But the funny thing, well, not funny, but ironic, is that Ryan kept sending me messages from unknown numbers, begging me not to go through with the divorce, that he still loved me, that we could work things out. I mean, the guy was literally living with his mistress, but at the same time trying to convince me to get back together with him. I told Christopher about this, and he suggested I talk to Madison directly. At first, it seemed like a terrible idea. Like, why would I want to talk to the woman who slept with my husband? But then I thought maybe Madison deserved to know that Ryan was using her just like he used me. I asked Christopher for Madison's contact. He had it because they were still working out divorce details, and I sent her a message saying we needed to talk. We met at a coffee shop a week later. Madison arrived looking terrible, like she hadn't slept in days, with swollen eyes from crying so much. I was nervous, but also determined. We sat down, and before she could say anything, I took out my phone and showed her the messages Ryan had been sending me, the messages where he told me he still loved me, that he wanted to get back with me, that she meant nothing to him. I saw Madison's face go from sadness to confusion and then to pure rage. She took out her phone and showed me messages where Ryan told her exactly the opposite, that I was ancient history, that he loved her, that they were going to build a life together. We sat there for like 2 hours, comparing messages, comparing the lies Ryan had told each of us. It turned out he had told Madison that I was controlling and abusive, that our marriage had been dead for years, that he was only with me out of obligation. He had told her that I was the reason we couldn't have children, that I had refused to continue with fertility treatments, a lie. I would have kept trying, but it was us who didn't have more money. He had told her basically everything he needed to say to make her feel like the heroine saving him from his terrible wife. And meanwhile, he was telling me that she had seduced him, that he had made a mistake, that I was the love of his life. Madison was devastated. I felt bad for her despite everything. because I realized that Ryan had manipulated her just like he manipulated me, just in different ways. I told her she had in 2010 to kick him out of her house, that he was a liar and a manipulator, and that he was only using her because he had nowhere else to go. She nodded and thanked me for showing her the truth, even though it was painful. We said goodbye, not as friends because that would be weird, but with a mutual understanding that we had both been victims of the same horrible man. 2 days later, Christopher called me laughing. It turns out William, Madison's father, had kicked Ryan out of the house immediately after Madison showed him the messages. William was one of those overprotective fathers who adored his daughter, and when he found out Ryan had been playing with her while trying to get his wife back, he literally threw all his stuff onto the street. And when I say all, I mean all. Madison sent me pictures later, and it looked like a garage sale on the sidewalk of the house, with clothes, shoes, his laptop, everything scattered on the lawn. Ryan basically became homeless. He had no job, no money, and now no place to live either. I heard through the grapevine that he was crashing on friends' couches, moving from place to place every few weeks when people got tired of him. He sent me one final message, a long, angry rant blaming me for everything that had happened to him, saying I had intentionally destroyed his life, that I was a cruel and heartless person. I read it, laughed a little because the lack of self-awareness was impressive, and then blocked him definitively from everywhere. The divorce was finalized like 4 months after the New Year's Eve party. Went to court, signed papers, and that was it. 10 years of marriage ended in an afternoon. I felt free but also sad, because despite everything, I had loved Ryan at some point and had imagined a future with him. But I also felt proud of myself for not staying silent, for not letting him cheat on me without consequences, for defending myself, even though the way I did it was dramatic and public. Today, almost a year after all, I'm fine. I'm still living in the same house, still working at the same place, and I've started dating someone new. Nothing serious yet, but it's nice to feel valued again. Christopher is also better. He and I are still friends, and sometimes we go out for coffee to catch up. I don't know what happened to Ryan exactly. I heard he finally got a job somewhere, but I'm not really interested. Madison also moved to another city to start over, according to what Christopher told me. Do I regret exposing Ryan in such a public way? Sometimes I wonder. I could have handled things more privately. I could have simply asked for a divorce without making the drama at the party. But honestly, I don't think so. Ryan didn't just cheat on me, he cheated on Madison. He cheated on his boss by having an inappropriate relationship at work, and he was prepared to keep lying to both of us while benefiting from both situations. He deserved to be exposed, he deserved to lose his job, and he deserved for everyone to know what kind of person he really was. The only part that sometimes weighs on me is that maybe I was too hard on Madison at first, but then I remember she also made the decision to get involved with a married man, so she wasn't completely innocent either. Life goes on, I guess. I learned a lot about myself during this whole process, about my capacity to endure things I shouldn't have endured, but also about my capacity to defend myself when I finally reached my limit. Not all marriages end at a New Year's Eve party with a dramatic exposure in front of 80 people, but mine did, and in a certain twisted way, I'm glad it was that memorable.